Hello, everyone. Ray Newman's here with Farewell, My King, the Call to Me podcast. And boy, we have a treat for you today. Today is going to be a little different, but it's going to be great. So grab your pens and your paper because here's what we're about to do. We're about to launch into the budgeting workshop that Wade did at local churches. So you get a treat. You can do this from your living room or from your office. We are going to be doing the intro all the way through all of the chapters of his budgeting book, Climbing the Mountain, the Heart of Budgeting. Okay, so how do you get a hold of us? Farewell, my king at Gmail. If you have any questions, how do you find us? We're on YouTube at Farewell, my king. Just search us up. We have more content there. And then last but not least, please check us out on Facebook at Wade J. Carey Author. That is the best place. That's where we're doing the budgeting at this time. So this is a great time to grab your budget or to grab a blank piece of paper and a pen and get ready to find out what is before the budgeting. So I will no longer be on the screen. I'm going to take this and turn this over to Wade, and he will be taking you through exactly the same process that he took his people through at local churches. So buckle up, stay with us, and keep track of all these key things that Wade has given to us. So without further ado, Wade J. Carey, the budgeting workshop, author and extraordinary. Wade, I'm going to jump off. Thank you for doing this for the people. And man, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. So take it over, Wade.
Well, thanks, Ray. First off, I want to say this is probably going to be a little different than what you might be expecting. So I ask you to bear with me, and we'll set up everything in the introduction, and then we'll start rolling through the chapters of the book so you can just get an idea. This is going to be a big picture view about budgeting. So let's get started. When I'm doing the live presentations, there's really, three parts to this, and they're all equally important. But the first part is the presentation, which is basically a synopsis of the book, Climbing the Mountain, the Heart of Budgeting. Part two, this can be done in different ways when it's done live, or, in the future, we're looking at doing, some live podcasts and things like that. Is a roundtable, because what we find out is that in dealing with money, there is pain that is very common to all of us, and that's pain that involves people who make very little, or people who make a lot. Money is a difficult subject and has to have its proper place in your life, or it's going to bring pain one way or another. But the third part is don't spend your time with this unless you plan on doing something, because action has to come after that. And so certainly there's going to be something in this that you can take away. And I'd encourage you to put it into action. Don't just have an idea in your head and let it bounce around your head. Let's do something about it. So overall, the subject of budgeting, I've found that it's a subject that no one wants to talk about, but everyone needs to talk about. And just like the child in the presentation doesn't want that cough medicine is going to be good for the kid. So this is just something I think is best. I know a lot of people have shown interest in this, but they're not really ready to make the jump. Make the jump. Let's do something about it, because putting pain behind you feel so much better when you take action versus not. So this is a subject that nobody wants, but everybody needs. So our goals with the whole process are twofold. Number one, I'm taking the position that during this presentation, and certainly in the book, that I'm going to stand up like an attorney, and I'm going to try to make a case. So you as a judge and jury, sit and listen and take it in, and see if the evidence leads you towards what I'm saying. And again, we're talking about big picture versus the minutiae of details. So I'm going to stand up and try to make a case to you. But secondarily, my underlying goal is to make sure that I help alleviate some pain, because when money does not have a proper place in your life, it's going to bring pain in some way, shape, or form. And it does. Whether you don't have enough money or whether you have a lot of money and you're worried about losing it. If money doesn't find its proper place, if your wallet is in a higher place in your life than it should be, then there's going to be some level of pain. And that's really what I'm trying to help alleviate. So stay tuned with that, and let's keep rolling. So several approaches. The first one is that perhaps I think is the most under discussed part of the Christian faith is that God identifies as our Father. And that's an important distinction. And I share that with groups. I share it in small groups. I share it in this presentation. A couple of passages on the screen. One is in Deuteronomy, which is the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, and one is in the New. And certainly, Christians are familiar with the Lord's Prayer, our Father in heaven, our Father. So several things about the Christian faith. There are some things in the Old Testament that are only for the theocracy of Israel and really don't apply today, the way they did then. But with God identifying himself as a father throughout the Bible, that is something we must stand on, because it's very important, because we become heirs of the entire kingdom through this father-child relationship. And that's how he relates to us. And we have to remember that. We're not just adherents, we're not just servants, but we are sons and daughters of the Most High God. And that carries with it an important distinction, and especially how we deal with money. So God expects us to be stewards, and throughout the entire process, we have to evaluate, well, why don't we like the subject of budgeting? And I came up with the idea of Philly cream cheese.
Hey, Deb, there's a budget meeting today.
Budget meeting? Sweet. Budget meeting.
Budget meeting?
Up to the side, we have the simulations versus the actual sales from our predictive algorithm. Now, as we break down quarterly over the past 2 years.
It's no wonder everything seems a little better with the delicious taste of Philly. Made with real milk and cream. It must be the Philly.
Woo!
So, the Philly to us as Christians is that God identifies as our Father, and that is extremely important, and it really requires us to improve and understand the way we deal with money. So that's the first approach. The second approach is in several spiritual gifts tests I've taken over the years, exhortation always shows up. And I use this a lot in my business life with my job, is finding a way to encourage people, show optimism, show excitement. That's always part of my ministry efforts. It's part of my business life. It's part of just about everything that I do. But since we're talking about the truth of Jesus Christ, we're also going to be talking about the truth. There's going to be some things here that may be a little difficult to swallow at first, but I'm going to be very direct. So I'm going to encourage you, but I'm not going to shade the truth one single bit, because this is an extremely important subject. And once you fully can embrace it, I think that you're going to feel a whole lot better about your situation, regardless of where you are and how much money you have in your bank account. So this third approach is extremely important. I'm not here to try to replace any of these detailed financial courses that are out there. I have facilitated several of these, and that's really how this book began, which I'll get into in just a few minutes. But this is the why we budget. That's really what we're leading up to through all of these different approaches. The how-to is very simple, really. Now, that doesn't say it's not important, but typically if we want to improve something in our life or overcome something in our life, we're always saying, well, how to? Well, give me a list of things. Give me 8, 10, or 12 things to do. And those are important, but the why kind of hovers over all of that. That's the authority over all of it. So why do we want to budget is what this book is about. And my hope is that you'll use this as a way to examine your heart as you go into the process, and then learn the process. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel. There's several out there, and later on in the program, we'll share, some of them. We're not going to endorse just one, but we're just going to acknowledge that there are several, of these programs out there where you can learn the how-to, but the how-to is important, but it's not as important as the why. And that's what really is the big monster we're trying to tackle in this whole seminar. So want to hit you right off with a question. And since, this is not in a format where I can sit a nasty audience, I'm going to just challenge you right up front. When you hear, the word budgeting or anything like that, how do you feel? I mean, just examine, what is your first feeling? Frustrated? Does it make you nauseous, angry, afraid, ashamed? Will you avoid it at all costs, which a lot of people do? Or does it make you happy? Are you weird like me like that? So the question again is, why are you here? And I've already challenged you that coming out of this, taking some action is going to be very important. But why are you here? What prompted you to want to spend a few minutes to go into this? What prompted you to be interested in this? And I want to encourage you to examine that in your own heart, so that you'll be able to identify with it, so that ultimately something good comes out of it. So, how this book come about? I'll spend just a minute on that. I just, it was 2017. I had just finished writing my 6th novel, and I met with Ray and our ministry partners, and we do a lot of things together. And he had been through a course that I facilitated, one of the how-to courses, which was really good. And he just came to me. We had lunch one day, and he just came to me and says, "I hate to tell you this, because I know you're just finishing up this other book, but you need to write this budgeting book." He had talked with several of the people, and we have found that there's a lot of common ground with what we all share in dealing with budgeting and money and things like that. And the symbolism that came out of it was, within 24 hours, I had the concept of the book, and I had the title of it. And 48 hours later, I had all the chapters laid out. 45 days after that, the book was written. So I took, several weeks to edit and to, get it ready for production, including arranging, the artist that we have that does all the graphics and whatnot. But really, the symbolism is we're born at odds with our wallet. And we're thinking about money all the time because we think it's going to help us to get this and that, and it does, but money is a commodity. So we're born separated, our hearts and our wallets, and this concept of this book is to unite them, so that whether you make a lot of money in your life or you make a little bit or somewhere in between, you are going to live at peace. And again, the financial courses are great, but the why isn't tackled often enough, I don't believe, to give you the full effectiveness of it. So we're not going to talk about merely techniques, because that has been done by some brilliant people in the finance world. This is about living faithfully, and that is so unbelievably important, because faith is an important element with God, and we'll talk about that in a second. We are spiritual, physical, and mental creatures. And, if you think about it, physically, our body, it will follow the battle between our soul, or our mental, side of us, which is our intellect and experiences, and our spirit made in the image of God. And if you think about it, this battle goes on all the time. Our soul may say, "Well, I want to go buy this new car," but your spirit says, "Well, you really don't have the money for it." Well, sometimes we're impulsive and we do things that we shouldn't. So there's this battle between what we know is right and, the things that we want. And again, that's part of the examination of what we're, digging into. I'd like to consider, or for you to consider, what your budget serves as in your life. And the best example I could come up with is, it's sort of like the plug in your bathtub. If you don't have a plug in your bathtub, the water's not going to stay in it. And your budget serves as that plug that will at least let you know what you're doing with your money, because it's going to disappear very quickly if you don't have a plug, if you don't have some kind of guardrails up. And as Christians, we cannot leave our wallets on the sidelines. And I know there's going to be some who are not Christians who are watching this. And I want to encourage you to just, set aside any spiritual differences and see what there is in this program that you can glean from it. I don't think anybody can really, leave your wallet on the sidelines if you want to have true success in dealing with money. Okay, so, rolling right into chapter 1 of Climbing the Mountain, the Heart of Budgeting. I'm suggesting, as we've talked about in the introduction, follow me up the mountain. This is going to be, as you're walking up an incline, it's going to take some huffing and puffing, but stay with me. So one of the things I want to point out right up front is, you're not alone. I touched on this just a minute ago. Whether you're rich or you're poor, we all struggle with proper money management. It causes anxiety, and that's really what we want to do is draw a circle around the anxiety and put it off to the side. Having more money won't necessarily solve your financial woes. Everyone thinks that you get a whole bunch more money, but if you don't have that plug in your bathtub, it's all going to drain away. And we've heard the horror stories of people winning a lottery and being broke a year later. So once you've mastered your money and you rule over it and it doesn't rule over you, you can get a bonus of $100 or $100 million, and you're going to treat it all the same way because it is not something we should be emotional about. And as we go through the program, I'm going to draw that out just a little bit more. So I believe that this concept in this book is applicable to those who make $10,000 a year and those who make 10 million. Whatever amount of money you make, learning how to put money in its proper place where it doesn't honestly become an idol. It doesn't rule over you. It doesn't become more important than anything else. Putting it in its proper place is extremely important, and will bring a lot of peace to your life. Hebrews 11:6 tells us that it is impossible to please God without faith. And how we treat our money shows God where our faith is. To me, it opens a door into our soul so he can understand exactly where we're at. And when we're not handling money properly, I believe it shows a very lower level of faith than we should possibly have. Ray?
Yes, sir.
Come on in. Anything before we move into chapter 2?
I'm telling you, man, this is so much of what people struggle with. The I need more money so I can budget. Really, it's what we're faithful with, no matter how little or how big. And I mean, you can go to all these gurus, and what they will tell you is if you don't learn how to manage a little, you'll never know how to manage a lot. And that's why your $100 million lottery winners end up broke, because the relationship with money is more critical than actually what the ones, twos, and zeros are.
Exactly.
And it really is, where's my heart? What do I want to do with what God's given me? And how does that portray in either $100 a week or it's 100 million a week? It's just how many zeros doesn't really matter. You can you can see the exposure of someone's heart pretty quickly. So
right. Well, so we're going to act as a tour guide. I'm going to lead you up the mountain. So just follow along. I'm pretty transparent about some of the travails I've had with money over the years, particularly the details in the book. Come from a working class family and have learned the hard way how to deal with it, and have been through many different campaigns or wars, with money. So, all right. So, as we're beginning our walk up the mountain, please keep an open mind. Dealing with money is about transparency. It's not about pride. Too often we think of money as like, well, I've got money and I'm going to try to keep it, secret. And, I want people to think I've got a lot of money, and that doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. There is an illusion that most of us, perhaps all of us, feel at some point that if we have a lot of money, we maintain control. And that's just not true. God created, as I just mentioned, he wants us to live by faith. And there are going to be people in this world. There's people who are watching this now who are just not going to make a ton of money in their life. But God still expects you to be faithful with it, just like he does the person who makes a lot of money. It's about scale. And, money is never something we can control anything with, although we really think that deep down, and we have to overcome that. So I'll challenge you with this. Who's the king of your wallet? Is it you or is it God? Embracing God's promises of heaven and beyond will help free you from the shackles of life, being about money and controlling it. Because too often we don't think about, well, if you love the Lord, you get to be with him in heaven, but ultimately our life is going to be here on the new earth, and scripture is very clear about that. And we're going to live forever and ever without pain, without suffering, without death. And at that point, we don't need a budget. For right now, we do, because we live in the fallen world. And God's promises of heaven and beyond are extremely important, and will help open up your heart to the fact that everything that you do in this life is just a vapor. It's just a small piece of your eternity. Having been through so many different ups and downs with money, just because you failed in the past, just because maybe you've started a budget and quit, past failures, they can lead to success if you let them, teach you how to move beyond those mistakes. And I'm certainly a great example of that. My first checking account, when I got out of high school, I bounced my first check. And here I am, writing a book about budgeting, having been through so many different travails with it. So I believe that good budgeting is about commitment. It's not about complication. It's about execution, not our education. It's about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It's not about our gratification. We are here as sons and daughters of the Most High God. And we're here for a short time until we enter eternity. So please keep an open mind as we're going through this. Try to release all the previous negative paradigms about, dealing with money. Ray, anything to add?
Wade, I love this slide. And, this is, I think, where most people fail, is that they take past failures and make them like standard. We fail, we learn. I believe that's where we really, and that's the reason why we're talking about the heart of budgeting, because there's going to be budget failures. There's not going to be enough money sometimes. You're going to miss something. You're not going to do something right. You're going to let emotion override reality sometimes, and what you should be doing. But it's about staying the course and understanding that you have to learn from these failures. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
this crucifying yourself to your budget is a big statement for someone who maybe you're barely making ends meet. But when it comes down to it, it is the act of obedience and servanthood with saying, hey, look, I'm going to make the most of whatever I get. And that's a big deal. And look, everyone's failed. I think that is the biggest reason why people don't engage in this, is failure.
Absolutely.
And they failed in the past. Well, look, you failed to walk when you were a baby in the past, but you just didn't quit. I
Right.
mean, we got to get up and keep walking, because money does not stop. You're always going to need it. You always need to budget it. And it's always going to be a pressure point. It doesn't matter how much you have, how good or bad that situation is. So, Wade, I mean, great. I love this
Absolutely.
chapter in the book for sure. Okay, I'm going to go run back in my corner.
Okay. So before we proceed, I've taken a quote by Thomas Edison and kind of tailored it for this presentation. Budgeting success is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Of course, he said genius, but I say budgeting success. And again, this is not about calculus or anything particularly complicated. This is about the sweat of your brow. This is about commitment. This is about, don't run from what you know you need to do. Embrace it. Keep an open mind. Follow me up the mountain. But budgeting success is about the sweat of your brow and the commitment you make to starting it and staying on it. Starting it and staying on it. Don't give up. Persevere. So, Chapter 3 is what I call the wild stallion. I've touched on this just a little bit earlier. We are born at odds with our wallets. And budgets are often, until we learn better, are like these, wild horses that must be trained. Every single one of us is born wanting to buy what we want, when we want, and all of that. And you have to train yourself. And, just like trying to break down a wild horse to become, something that can be of good service to you, that could save your life, your budget can be the same exact thing. So, Ray, you actually had, mentioned earlier something from Luke 16:10. Whoever can be trusted with very little, can be trusted with much. So basically, when you are good at budgeting, then, well, let me ask you this. Why would God give you more if you're not being faithful with what he's given you? Why would he? He'd be
Well, I
doing
mean,
you a disservice.
who would? I mean, you wouldn't give your children more cookies if they continue to act like heathens once you give them the cookie.
Exactly.
We reward certain behavior, and this is not the ladder of works. This is not the mountain of works. This is the mountain of obedience. And I think that's where we really need to pay more attention to. This is an individual sport that has outward consequences. So, I mean, I love this. And on the Facebook page, we put out I actually have a wild stallion on there, because this is out of control. I mean, in a lot of people's lives right now, a wild horse is exactly what you're trying to tackle when it comes to your budget. So this chapter, I mean, if you don't read any other chapter of this book, the accountant and this one, the wild stallion, this is where all the money is. So once again, Wade, I'm gonna go back to my corner so you can finish your workshop.
Okay. So again, look in the mirror, be honest. Many of us think that, well, I'd like to win a lottery. I could do this, I could do that. I could, give money to the church or whatever. Those are all fine thoughts. But the truth is, if you love Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you've already won the lottery. You've already been given, an inheritance that's this entire universe that will be redeemed according to God's word. We learn in this life obedience. Bonhoeffer said, one act of obedience is better than 100 sermons. And that is absolutely true. Being obedient with what God gives us, whether it's a lot or a little, or most of us, somewhere in between, those are the things that God is looking at in this life. And, again, this is about obedience, and it's about learning to live within the confines that God wants us to live in. All right. Now we have hit the absolute heart of the matter. If there's nothing else you take away from this is the concept that I'd like for you to come away with the most. Thinking of your budget as your heart, physiologically in your body is the most important thing, because every single penny that you have in your life needs to flow through your budget. And I mean every single penny, just like every drop of blood, flows through your heart. And the reason is because your budget, really, it shows God where your faith is. Is your faith in, the theological term often used, mammon? Is it in money? Is it in something that's outside of him? Because this is where, money becomes an idol. And if we're putting our hope in anything but Jesus Christ, we are in trouble. If we're putting our hope in ourselves or in something outside of God, then we're headed for disaster. And the purpose of tracking every single penny in your life is not to catch the bank making a mistake or something like that. And I'll have some comment on this a little bit later, but it's an exercise. And that's really what's so important about it. And I think that, how we deal with money, we need to make a covenant with God that we're going to show him our faithfulness through that. The example I like to use is at the end of each month, I treat our family finances. We have debits and we have credits. I have a dashboard and a 9-page spreadsheet, and I track every single transaction. And unlike some of the famous finance courses, I do believe in credit cards. I like to game them. And I know that's been called foolish by some. I don't care. I'll take those points because those end up being free vacations if you know how to do it. It's not for someone who's just getting started budgeting, but ultimately, I track every single transaction. I don't use a debit card. I use a credit card, and I pay the annual fee. I use it for business. I use it for everything that we do. And it's nice to get those miles to go on vacation. Now, that's just my personal take. But ultimately, tracking every single transaction, however you're doing it, is extremely important. And again, this is something that I always consider at the end of each month. I balance everything and move the amount in my checkbook forward into a new budget. And once I have this printed, budget, I feel like I'm sliding it across the table and thanking Jesus for his provision. And that is really the heart of this matter is knowing that God is your source. You may have jobs and you may have investments and all these other things, and those are great, but those aren't your source. Those are just mere commodities. They aren't really anything that's personalized. So, a passage I like to use is Hebrews 11:4. We want to be able and give, our best to God, not just give him a mere pittance like Cain did. MLK said, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And your whole financial plan, especially if you're young and just getting started, you don't need to know the whole plan. What you need to know is taking a first step and then continue forward. For example, starting, a Roth IRA or starting some money market. Just all of these different things are about the consistency and every single month applying these things so that when you get to be older, you have some kind of a nest egg. And if you don't end up doing that, then it's going to be a bit of a struggle. But either way, this is a matter of faith, and I think it's the most important matter of faith because a lot of times we can have all of the faith in the world, but we leave our wallet out. It's like, no, God, you can't have that wallet. That doesn't belong to you. That belongs to me. And we just can't do that because when you don't love the Lord, his wrath remains on you. But when you do, he is going to sanctify you. He is not going to allow you to hold on to things that are idols. He's just not going to do it. Ray, anything to say?
Ooh, you already said a whole bunch of mouthfuls. So I will say that the open heart concept from this book really speaks to the open heart concept of the gospel in your faith is what am I going to trust him with? And what am I going to understand that I'm not trustworthy with? And this is, is such a powerful part of doing anything. If you want a fitness journey or build a house or buy a car, anything you do, you have to go after it with an open heart and be ready or willing to deal with maybe some good and bad. So I think more of the open heart area is just believing that you're not 100% right about maybe your view of money, your view of Jesus and money, that there might be some bad teaching there. And really accounting for every penny that you spend is obedience. It's obedience. Man, you work all these hours to gain this resource, and then you're just going to let it slip away. I disagree with that, and I believe that it should be a joy and a pleasure to know exactly where every penny goes. And then once you know the pennies, the dollars make sense. You can make adjustments.
Absolutely.
Great, Wade. Hey, I'm going back to my corner.
Go back to your corner. Chapter 5 in the book is about rock bottom. Many of us have experienced this, and I don't know that this gets touched on enough during finance courses. Sometimes you can end up at the bottom of the well because you've been a fool. Many other times it's because of circumstances in life, because nobody gets through without going through some stuff. You just don't. I've been there several times, and I've often, wondered why. And it all of a sudden hit me when I was first giving this presentation back a few years ago in front of several members of my home church. Here I was having just gone through all of these tribulations and ups and downs, and mostly downs dealing with money. And there I was standing in front of a group of 40 people and delivering an encouraging message. And it's just like, sometimes we got to go through stuff because God wants to use that in our outreach efforts to others. Because let me tell you something, the Christian family business is about making disciples, and that's making followers, and that's encouraging people to get to know the Lord, because we don't know, who is going to end up loving Christ or not, but we are ambassadors. So sometimes these difficult times we go through, sometimes we have hit rock bottom, sitting at the bottom of a well, looking up, thinking there's no way out of this. But we have to look up, because we're not looking up just up at the sky. We're looking up at God. And, there is a distinction, like I touched on, between wrath and tribulations. If you don't love the Lord, his wrath does remain on you. And sometimes that makes people squeamish, but it does. You're actually God's enemy. But when you do, you can expect to have some tribulations. Everybody goes through some stuff, but these are the things that teach us to not focus on ourselves, to focus on loving God and to love others. And I'm telling you, this is extremely important. Some of the best things that have ever happened to me in my, as of right now, 62 years plus, has been the tribulations I've gone through, especially with money. And I often think of it as like these difficult times is like when a Marine goes through basic at Paris Island. I mean, these guys and gals are getting just, clobbered by the drill instructors. They're going through all of this stuff, but it's to make them a better Marine so that they can survive. And sometimes these tribulations, these financial difficulties we have, is exactly what God's doing to us. Because a drill instructor at Paris Island who doesn't train the recruits to become good Marines is doing them a disservice. Same thing. This is a wicked world that we're born into. And God has to give us some difficult times sometimes to teach us how to deal with it. And I've got some more examples I'm going to touch on later, particularly about Solomon from the Bible. But just remember, as we're going through these tribulations, fear is Satan's native language. The Bible warns us a lot. We don't want to fear. We want to look up, and we want to see God above all of it. And if we're going through these difficult times, I think it's fine to pray that they're not going to be severe and all this other. But ultimately, he's the one who has allowed these things to happen to us. And when you love him, he's doing it for a reason. Even if you can't understand it now, God is a couple of times in the Bible referred to as like the potter. He is molding us, and ultimately, when you love Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, God is molding us into His image, and that's going to have some tribulation. So if you're at rock bottom, if you've been there before, or you're there now, just remember to look up, not just to the light in the sky, but to the one who created the light in the sky. Right?
Most things are built from zero. We don't start building a building with part of the building already built. I know that's almost a tongue twister. Sometimes people look at this rock bottom, especially with their finances, and believe there's no hope. But really, there's no better place to be. And I know that sounds so counterintuitive, but there's no place better to be able to be objective, because it is hard to be objective with $100,000 in your account to budget. You are almost forced into position to budget when there's $10 but $35 worth of bills to pay.
Yes.
It's different, and that's what happens at Paris Island. That's what happens when these things happen, is that you get all this stuff taken away so you can be built back again. So if you're listening to this and you're watching this and you're at zero, that's exactly where you need to be. And you need to be obedient, and you need to have fear of the Lord, not fear of man's systems and all this other stuff. You just need to be, I'm in exactly the place I'm supposed to be. That's it's hard to not spend money when you got $100 in your pocket, but you can't be taught these lessons when you have money. Sometimes you have to be taught these lessons without.
You have to live them, and you have to persevere. No doubt. Chapter 6 is about miracles. I tell a story that I won't, tell here, but it's about some good friends I've renamed and use a fictitious name, Charlie and Faye. They were down and out. Faye had a basic job making basic money, and Charlie had to go back into a business he didn't want to go back into. But the miraculous things that happened in their story is just unbelievable. Some things came along a few years after they just were obedient and did the best they could. I mean, using coupons to buy groceries and this other kind of stuff. And then an employee stock program came along, and now my friend Charlie is retired and he's purchasing real estate. So you don't, just because you're at that rock bottom, you don't know where you're headed to, but God does, and I do believe He does reward obedience. So again, we want to walk without fear. And this is something I think is a great misunderstanding about the nature of God. In Luke 12:7, that it's a reference to the hairs on our head are numbered. Well, for those who have it, I used to have it. But it shows the minute details that nothing happens. That the God we serve is the God of all of the microscopic quarks, all the way out to the enormity of the universe, which is often estimated to be 156 billion light years across. He's the God of the little and the big. And so every single thing that happens is, we can't humanize Him to the point where we think, well, he doesn't really care that I've got $12 in my checking account. He knows exactly how much you have. So, it is false to assume that He doesn't know. And I think it's a fallacy to think that, if you're going through a difficult time now, or you're not where you want to be now, that you're always going to be there. And I think that's crazy to think that. Jeremiah 32:27 says, I am the Lord, the God of all mankind. Is there anything too hard for me? Just think about that. He knows everything. He knows exactly what we do, and He's always examining our heart. Now, how that is, we can't really get. We can't possibly understand that. But it doesn't make it less true because we don't understand it, because we have human limitations. So just remember that God steps in with miracles. And if you're in a difficult place, if you're looking up and you're looking at Him and you're talking to Him and you're praying to Him, I don't think it's crazy to expect Him to step in with some kind of a miraculous rescue of wherever you're at. But you've got to be obedient, right?
Walking without fear is so difficult. And I think sometimes Wade, you killed it with saying we humanize the attributes of God. This is not like anyone else that you can find in this world. It's outside of this world. And, I guess the cliche sometimes kills the meaning, is that every hair on your head, if you had it or did or still do, it's accounted for. The sparrow that hits the ground is accounted for. Everything is accounted for. And, once you get your heart right here, once you understand that you're a part of something bigger, it just makes all this seem so different. And, there's a difference between knowing and feeling. There's a difference between the brain and the mind. And, we'll get into that one day in a future podcast, but you've got to understand that there is some brain stuff you have to do here with the pluses and minuses. But there is a mind thing here that says be renewed, renew your mind. And this is where you do not walk in fear in this, and know you'll be cared for.
No doubt. All right. So chapter 7 is what I call the blueprint. I happen to use a spreadsheet. I know there's apps, but there's three basic parts to this blueprint. It's the actual spreadsheet. You have a dashboard. Basically, it's an accounting of your debits and credits, and the person who's executing it, the humble servant, which is you. But there's got to be a game plan, and that's really, God wants us to be a conduit with our money. It's going to come in, and we need to account for it. So if you get $100 bonus, it's got to come in. Okay, well, I'm going to put a little over here, put a little over here, put a little over here. We're going to spend this. We're going to do that. but a couple places in the Bible talks about writing the vision and keeping it simple. When I started the whole budgeting thing way back in the late 80s, computers weren't real fancy. You had this 5 1/4 dual floppy disk where I'd stick one in and it'd load the software, and I'd stick another one in where I'd have the programs. And it's just amazing how it has come along throughout the years. I really didn't have this grand plan. I would have never been able to guess that it would come to the point where I actually would write and publish a book and, be doing some podcasting and do presentation. I couldn't have possibly imagined that. Not in a gazillion years could I have imagined that. So let's say you work a job and, you get a big bonus. Say you get a $7,000 bonus, or you inherit some money or something. Something comes along, that money, whether it be $7 or $7,000 or whatever it is, it has to be treated the same way. And that's what I have with my spreadsheet. I have, incoming money, and doesn't matter what amount I stick in there, it's going to come in, and then I'm going to have that amount, and then I'm going to start placing it places. I'm going to, put it away. I'm going to spend some. I'm going to save some. I'm going to give some away. That's a fairly, common expression. And I think it's a good one. I think it's a worthy one. We need to keep that balance, because here's the key is we don't want to get so attached to that money. Like, oh my gosh, I've got this bonus and it just feels so good. I'm gonna hug it up and love it up. We have to remove our emotions from the way we deal with our money. We have to have this blueprint. And I'm telling you, I've had a lot of people come into my classes and they say, well, I've started it, but I never kept up with it. Well, you didn't put your heart in it. You didn't look at this as a covenant between you and God, and it's a bilateral covenant. He's going to provide for you, and you have to account to him how you're spending it. And to be honest, I think oftentimes we don't want to do that because we know that we've got some selfishness that we're trying to hide. Get it out on the table. Shine the light into the darkness. It's going to feel so much better, even if you're in arrears every single month, which I have been many times. It's best to just get it out on the table and don't try to hide things that you think you might be embarrassed about. I mean, we're talking about God. We're not talking about another person. So we don't want to have an emotional attachment to money. So when you have the proper spreadsheet, you have a blueprint, it's going to come in. You're going to disperse it accordingly and put it over here, and then you're going to be done. I mean, it's amazing that that I can get some kind of a bonus or a tax return or something like that, and I'm telling you, in 1 minute it's gone, and that's good because I don't want to get attached to it emotionally. Right?
Every penny has a name. Most of and this is more of the budgeting in works, not the heart of the budget, but every penny has a name. You name every penny that comes into your house and you put it in its proper spot. And that doesn't mean that some of these pennies can't be in fun spots or saving spots or bill spots, but it has to have a name. If you don't have names, if you don't have a place, and that's where the conduit works so well, is you got to have a game plan. And, we won't go into the X's and O's and the zeros and the periods, but it's got to have a name. If you have a name for it, then like Wade just said, it is a game, and that game can be played with precision.
That's exactly right. To finish this up, God honors you by what goes into your budget. You honor him by what goes out of it. So chapter 8 is the accountant. This is a kind of a cutesy thing, but it actually is quite functional. I know Ray will have some comments on it. It's something that my wife, Alyssa, and I had kind of conjured up as kind of a joke, because what you want to not have is a bad guy in in a marriage, and the person who is doing the budget typically becomes the bad guy, and you have to stop that. So we often will talk about the accountant as being this yahoo who's outside of the marriage, just like this fictitious third person who just kind of brings in the news like, look, we've spent all of our Christmas budget and we haven't finished all of our gifts. Well, that doesn't need to get pinned onto the wife or the husband. That needs to be, this is the accountant who's bringing that message in, because it just, you don't want to demonize your spouse or your partner because of them bringing in the cold hard reality that we often don't have enough money to do, what we need or want to do. So again, this blueprint and this game plan is extremely important, and this mythical accountant has to be the one who's bringing it in. And again, it's extremely important. This is, money has torn apart many a relationship, many a marriage, and referring to this accountant as being someone outside of the marriage, it helps unite spenders and savers. Again, we don't want any villains. Staying on top of things has some benefit too. I'll tell the story of many years ago. I've been staying at Marriott hotels for decades. Many other hotels, but mostly Marriott, and gain Marriott points and get free hotels. Well, it was a Memorial Day weekend, and I check my accounts every single day, every single one of them, even my frequent flyer and credit card accounts, all of that. And someone had called in and stolen all my points. I mean, and it took me many years. I mean, many nights on the road to get these points. And I actually ended up got them back. Marriott was great to work with. I actually had to go down to my police station to fill out a theft report. And I think Marriott had me do that just in case it was fraud, which I think was smart on their part. But ultimately, I caught it and had my points restored because I was checking my accounts every single day. And it doesn't take that long. You just get into this routine. You get up, have some coffee, and check your accounts, because if there's any kind of mistake or there's anything going on, you can see it right away. It's best to do it not 3 weeks later. Do it that very next day. And again, the budget that you have, and with this accountant who's managing it, that's your family business, and every business has debits and credits. And when you want to start planning for things, you want to start accruing money for it. So in the end, money can't save you, but by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail, is what Ben Franklin said. And I think if you don't have these things, if you don't have a blueprint, and you don't have this concept of an accountant who is not going to be, you can demonize the accountant, but you don't want to demonize your spouse, right?
I tell you, Wade, this has been one of the biggest chapters that I tell people to read first sometimes. This this like fake and imaginary guy. Now, this accountant is played. It is an act. It's played by either or of the people in the home. But this is a great way to do this. Now, and I want to rewind a minute. We're not talking about a couple of hundred Marriott points. We're talking that Wade could have probably stayed in a hotel for about a half a year.
Yeah.
and this is big money. This is a lot of stuff that if he wouldn't have been on top of it, it would have just evaporated. And I think that's what happens because we're scared of what we're looking at, or I'm a spender and I'm scared that I'm spending too much, or I'm a saver and the spender's overruling me, or I'm overruling the spender, and we're always at odds. This accountant comes in and it's only facts, no feelings.
No feelings. That is a great point. And to your point, Ray, the Marriott points was worth in value over $10,000. I've stayed at Marriott a lot. And so by the accountant getting up every single morning and checking every single, account that has anything to do with finance or anything like that, the accountant served the family very well. So the accountant gets a pat on the back for that. But when the accountant comes in and says, okay, well, we're out of grocery money and we got to go buy some groceries, well, you don't want somebody to get demonized for that. So the accountant kind of takes the lumps, and sometimes an occasional pat on the back when he or she, and it can be he or she or he and she, whatever it is, the accountant needs to be outside of the relationship, and it's just no feelings.
No feelings. It's like someone looking inside of your budget that doesn't live in your house, and it is ones, twos, threes, and zeros. That's it.
That's right.
So, and congratulations, Wade, for saving 10 grand in Marriott points just because you checked an account. Next slide, Ray.
Here we go. All right, we're talking about banks now. The first one is the bank above. I think it's important that we acknowledge, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talked about it, to store your treasures in heaven. Acts of obedience will give us enormous deposits into our bank above. Of course, I'm talking about for followers of Jesus Christ, because the Christian worldview includes most of our life being lived on the other side of death's door, and heaven turns into the new earth, and we'll live here on the earth again, according to the prophecies within Scripture. So, our acts of obedience and how we handle our money makes enormous deposits into our eternal bank account. That's the bank above, and that is so important. I would say a lot of the things that I'm talking about, throughout this book is not because I'm a particularly smart person or anything like that, but I am available, and are you available for doing kingdom work? Whether it be with your money or your acts of kindness or whatever, being available to make deposits into your bank above is a huge part of our walk of faith. And single thing that we do, it may not feel like it, the things that we do that are quiet and, silent. I'm not a big fan of people doing charity work and then, taking pictures of it. If you're going to do it for God's glory. Don't, post it up on social media. Do it where it's between you and God, because those are the things that will last forever. Moth and rust will destroy things here on earth, but not the stuff you put in your bank above. You can't good your way into heaven with your deeds, but you can absolutely get some rewards later on. And I don't think we should be being obedient for the rewards, but it sure is a nice benefit to think about, that my acts of faith and obedience here on earth now are pleasing to God, and that He will reward me for them later. That's just a natural good feeling. So my challenge question at this point is this: if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, if you identify as a Christian, are you living your life like a non-believer when it comes to handling money?
Mouthful, Wade. Mouthful. I want y'all to just think about that for a second, because I will raise my hand to say that I had, for a long time, and still at certain times, do this. So this is not a finger being pointed. This is a statement to shake you into realizing how important this is. So in the good deeds thing, some people with certain church backgrounds will probably flare up at this, but your Father on earth would reward you for your good deed, for your good deeds. If you did something good, and your dad would congratulate you and pat you on the back, that same relationship is compounded in the bank above. And that bank is one that's running the emptiest in so many people's lives. It's more than money. It's about, am I willing to trust my Father in the depths of my soul to know that I can give this away, or I can do this with my money, and I'm still going to be provided for. It's so, non-believers can do what they want to with their money, but if you are a believer in Jesus, then we have a requirement to love our neighbor as ourselves, and sometimes that might mean,
yes,
we that might mean that we need to go clothe them and feed them and help them with their light bill. That is part of being that loving neighbor that Jesus on that mountain said that we were supposed to be.
There you go. Okay, so the bank below, that would be your chapter 10 in the book. That's your checking account. That kind of serves as the brain. I've known people who don't even balance their checkbook, which I can't even imagine. But if you're not, you definitely need to. But that checking account, it is important. Living within your means, is obviously, what we're talking about. And I believe in saving old school style. Back about a decade ago, I knew I was going to be publishing my third book. And back then I was with a Christian publishing imprint, and it was going to cost me about $2,400. And so a year ahead of time, before I figured I was going to have it published, I started with a line in my spreadsheet, just stuck $10 in there. And every time I got a little extra money, I took some out of my own personal weekly, fun money that I get, and I just kept saving old school, a little bit each week, a little bit each week. Well, by doing it that way, by setting this little vision and starting to faithfully contribute toward it, I couldn't even remember all the things that happened. But a year later, I had that money, and I didn't take one penny out of the family budget. And that's what I've done with all of my publishing endeavors. I've never taken any money out of the family budget. And God has always provided because of the faithfulness. So saving in modest increments is, we don't like that these days, but I'm telling you, going the old school route is absolutely the way to go. And we have to balance having fun and saving, and we want to give. We want to keep balance in all of these things, but doing it the old school way, there is nothing wrong with it, because I believe at that point, God does get involved. Billy Graham said something, and I've used, some of his information throughout, some of my books, but I didn't even realize it until I had written this book and published it that he has an expression, a quote that is the absolute crux of everything that we're talking about here. Ray, I'm going to move into the next one.
I want to say one thing about this. What Wade's asking you to do is delay gratification. It's a proverb. It's part of the fruit of the spirit in self-control. This is a big deal, and a bigger deal in our culture right now is that we always want what we can have before we can afford it. And what Wade's saying is that he saw something in the future he wanted. He put a little bit of money behind, and then he had that money. He delayed gratification and paid for it in cash instead of charging it up. So
that's right.
I'm moving on, Wade. I just wanted
there we go.
I wanted to hit that point for sure.
I'm glad you did. So, Billy Graham, this quote: if a person gets their attitude toward money straight, it will help straighten out almost every other area in their life. Just let that sink in for a moment. If you get your attitude towards money right, it's going to help straighten out just about everything else, because let's face it, we live in a world where we have to have money, but if it is not in its proper place, if we're overly emotional about it, or we put too much hope into it, it's going to create an imbalance, and that's where the enemy Satan comes in and attacks us. But if we get it right and we show the obedience, and we're willing to do things old school and do them properly and do them right and delay gratification, we're willing to do those things, God will reward it, and it will help straighten out everything in our walk of faith. That's how important I think this is. So, chapter 11 is about open hand. We talk about an open mind, an open heart, open hand. We're not going to get into whether there should be tithing or joyful giving. I think that I found that there is agreement that this is a heart matter. The question I would more pivot towards is, in your giving or tithing, are you just merely tipping God? Or are you giving him the minimum? That's never a good thing. We want to find joy in doing kingdom work, and we want to have faith that God is going to help us, and he is going to reward us when we are faithful. So again, it's all about your heart and your desire to give, but it is important to note, please hear me now, when you're giving because you're a son or daughter of the Most High God. You're not on a quid pro quo with God. And there's some people who talk about that. Well, you want to give a lot, so God will give you a lot. That ain't how it works. And I'm going to strongly stand in the headwinds against that. That's where you start to get into the prosperity gospel nonsense and things like that. What is important is the eternal promises of a new heaven and a new earth, and that being generous shows us that we love both God and our neighbor, right?
This has been so misused, Wade, and I want to thank you for clarifying this in this workshop, because this is where most Christian workshops about budgeting stop. This is where they start and stop. I'm a firm believer that you should give to your local church. If you're shadowing the window and you're using the bathroom and the lights and all that stuff, I think you have an obligation to share the expense so that local church can stay open and pursue the gospel outside of the four walls. But I believe there's a bigger requirement there too. I believe that not only would your cash, you need to be given to your community, and that means maybe even your personal, your personal time. There is a lot of ways to give, and God doesn't differentiate between $100,000 and 100 hours of your time. If your budget's so small that there's no money left, then that means you need to spare up some time. But if there's zeros in the account, that doesn't negate you from being able to go give the time. So
That's exactly right. That's
just
exactly right.
This is a heart issue. If you're struggling with this, prayer closet, get the heart right, because we are to be generous, loving people. And you can't put that, you can't do this. This is a foreign concept for someone who has not had that renewing of their mind.
Yep.
That I just, without renewing in the mind, this is hopeless. So, but
I
Wade,
promise you, having the open hand is outward living. And the more outward you live your life, I promise you, you're going to live a much, 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 much happier, better life the less you're focusing on you. And having an open hand and being generous in many areas, including your wallet, is going to only enhance your life. It's going to be a benefit for you. Party time. That means we are going to talk about having some fun. I believe one of the most underrated idols that we have in this world, the modern day world today, is the leisure. People can get so wrapped up in having so much fun. Other times people can get so wrapped up in duty that they don't have any fun. Again, this is a game of balance that the enemy plays with us. So you don't want to focus too much on having a good time, but you don't want to focus too little either. You know, sometimes I can actually feel that pull. I am far from being lazy, but sometimes I get a little obsessed with duty and handling things, and I have to find a way to enjoy myself a little bit more. You know, binge shopping, which can seem like it's a great fun thing to do, it's the enemy, and I promise you, it's a liar. You know, you can think I'm going to feel good if I buy this, but guess what? You know, as soon as you get it, it doesn't really deliver any kind of pleasure. I like what I heard evangelist Frank Turek talking about is, as you live in your life, are you on a pleasure quest or on a truth quest? Because if you're on a pleasure quest, you're just never going to find it. You're never going to find happiness if you're pursuing just mere happiness. If you're pursuing truth, which is both a virtue and a person, Jesus Christ, you're going to get happiness. You're going to get holiness. You're going to get everything. If you're just pursuing pleasure, that's worldly. That's paganistic. That's hedonistic. And if there's too much of your life is focused just on the having fun stuff, you're not going to be a happy person. So one of the things I like to talk about as moving out of the issue of this important concept of balance is the BFL. It's a Budgeg Football League. This is early 2024, and this year we're going to celebrate our 40th anniversary. It's a fantasy football league. And guess what we don't do? We don't wager. It is all fun. I pay $20 a year with the other owners, and now we used to do everything by hand, but now it's online. I can see somebody runs the ball 5 yards and he's on my team. I can see it, update my phone right away. It's fantastic, but it is about the love of it, and it doesn't cost anything. We get together on Labor Day weekend, and we spread it out over 3 days. Our drafting of players is like a family reunion. The point is, some of the most incredibly wonderful blessings, the things you can do in life, they don't have to cost you a lot of money. You don't have to go hop on some cruise to have a good time. Sometimes just chill at the house and have some movies to watch, or things like that. Everything that is fun in life, having a good time, party, it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money. So intentionally, God placed us in time, and he wants us here at this time, and he wants us to keep balance in our life between having fun and having a sense of duty.
Party time is a necessity. because there's the constant doer will do themselves out and get burnout and then make bad decisions and go spend more money than what they have allotted to do stuff. So the Bible's very clear is that we're a working creation. That means we are built to work. Part of glorifying and worshiping God is our work. And that's your physical job. Your physical act that you go do at your job is glorifying God with your nature doing that work. But also we can glorify him with our leisure and our pleasure, but we can't be addicted to either one.
Right.
If we're addicted to either one, then we're taking our eyes off the one that is the most important, and that's Christ. So if you're doing this for his glory, then you will always be in balance.
Correct. He wants us to have a good time. He is the creator of pleasure, but it can become way imbalanced if we're not careful. Dreams and goals. Now, how do I present this without it becoming across negative? A lot of these business courses and these motivational speakers will talk about goals. Goals are important. I think if you're going to achieve any kind of goals, your heart and your wallet must be in sync. Finding your purpose in the kingdom is extremely important. But we can't leave God out of the equation of our goals just because you have a goal. I mean, listen, when I was younger, I had a whole lot of goals. And I look back on them now and I think, what a fool I was. So having dreams and goals, you cannot exclude the creator of the universe in that. And when I was younger, I would never imagine that he would have me writing and publishing books and doing all that. I mean, as of this moment, I have close to 750,000 published words across 10 publications. That was never a goal in my life, but it was a purpose that he brought to me, and I was obedient and followed it and continued to follow it. And there's not a lot of glamour in it, trust me. There's a lot of lonely moments in it. I'm not doing it for the money because there's no money in it, and this is going on 15 years. So hope binds our soul, and it brings in the fullness of our purpose in the kingdom. But false hope, just in merely worldly goals, that's going to destroy you. Let's look at the example I love to use of Solomon. You read, he had prayed for wisdom, asked for wisdom, he got wisdom, but he didn't use his wisdom. And when you read Ecclesiastes, you can see, I mean, this guy had between wives and concubines, 1,000 women. He was the richest, and other than Jesus, the wisest person, but he didn't use it properly. He used it for his own glory and not God's glory. And he was very sounding kind of depressed in Ecclesiastes, toward the end of his life. He said, everything is futile. So when we're pursuing God's glory, we're going to succeed. And the Solomon story, I don't think we talk about it enough. I mean, he had everything that a person could want, except he didn't have God's true wisdom, which was glorifying God, not himself. So, following a plan, conserving, using our budgetary parameters. I mean, these are extremely important things, and they help keep us grounded so that our dreams and goals don't focus on us, but it focuses on God's kingdom.
And a lot of these goals and dreams, Wade, have to be built on the rock, not on sand. So that, and I think that's especially if you're young in your journey right now. I mean, I'm not talking about just age, young in your Christian journey, or even young in your age, is that, hey, I'm 100%. You want to go build a big business? Hey, write that goal out and go get that big business. But don't do it for any other reason but to glorify your creator. Because all the other things, like King Solomon said, is vanity. It's just complete, and it's a basket with no bottom. It never fills up. You can never win. And if you're doing, our purpose here is to glorify God, glorify the Savior of Jesus Christ. And if we don't make our goals and dreams built on that foundation, they're probably not going to work out long term. It's just, I mean, that's the simple math. That's the simple math. Now, some people win here. Some people can get a lot of these goals and dreams knocked off. Solomon did, and it didn't work out for him in the end. He
No,
was a
it
very
didn't.
sad
And
man
he
at the
didn't
end of
take
his
any of
life.
that with him when he passed away. And that's the thing is that's why, going back to, the bank above, when we're doing things for our glory, it ain't coming with us. When we're doing it for his glory, it'll last forever. A couple of isms. Winston Churchill said, continuous effort, not strength nor intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential. And again, this kind of ties in with the Edison thing I talked about earlier, this continuous effort. It's not about anything fancy. It's not about anything complicated. It's about the sweat of our brow. And some Yahoo said, a good budgeter who doesn't have a lot of money is wealthier than a bad budgeter who has lots of money and doesn't know where it goes. Be a good budgeter. You're going to feel wealthy. And I'm telling you, people are going to think you're wealthy because you have got your act together. You're handling your money. You're staying in balance. You're glorifying God. You're serving others. You're serving yourself, your family. You're having fun, but you also have a strong sense of duty, and God will reward those things. So we've been climbing up this mountain through all these different categories, through all these different chapters. Once we get to the top, we're at the summit. Our heart and our wallet are united. Woohoo! That's great stuff. It's important to remember that the spiritual leads, the mental and the physical. Our spirit made in the image of God, having a sense of duty to the kingdom must be the most important thing. And it has to rule over ourself, which is our own personality and our body. Once we get to the summit, though, we're not climbing anymore. We got to go to defending. And that's a whole separate issue that has to do with spiritual warfare. That's something we're going to get into later on. I have some books that are about that, and I have a follow-up to this that I'll talk about in a moment. But just because you've been a bad budgeter in the past, let's keep that in the rearview mirror. Because building wealth is a wonderful thing when you can use it properly. But that doesn't mean you're successful in life just because you build a lot of wealth. An example I love to use is the Mississippi River. Wherever you're at in your journey dealing with money, the Mississippi River runs all the way down. It runs into the Gulf of Mexico. Well, if you start traveling north, you're going to go through New Orleans, and you're going to work your way up to Vicksburg, Memphis, St. Louis, even up to the Twin Cities in Minnesota. But that's not what it's all about. It's all about going way up to the source, which is Lake Itasca, way up in north central Minnesota. If you want to understand everything, it all starts there, and it all starts with the provider, which is Jesus Christ. So my message to you is, never stop budgeting. You're not going through this alone, and it is an act of faith. And if you're going to do it, which I've encouraged you to do from the beginning, don't stop. Get it going. Do not give up.
Yeah, you here's the deal is that every single one of us failed at walking, but we still got up again because everyone else was walking. Look, not everyone is going to take this serious. You're going to have to be the one that changes this curse in your family. You're going to have to stand up and say, hey, I'm going to take control over this, and I'm going to leave my family a legacy, even if that legacy is that they're strong budgeters, that they are strong with their accountability when it comes to money, because someone who budgets their money correctly will budget their time correctly. They will budget other things in their life correctly because it's all connected. And, the people who waste time, they don't get a lot out of it. Well, if you waste money, you don't ever get a lot out of it. And the way to wrangle that wild horse in is to just don't quit. If you make a mistake, get up and go again. That's it. The heart, you got to have the heart of a lion and the bones of a baby, because you're going to fall down, but you got to get back up, get strong again, and just stay with it.
There you go. So, as we're talking about all of these things, when we think that we, our money is a source for us and not God, that's nothing but pride, because self-reliance is pride. C.S. Lewis said, relying on God has to start all over every day as if nothing has yet been done. Self-reliance is pride. It is bad. Chapter 15 is we're starting to wrap up here is don't look down. Once you've started this and you climb through all of these obstacles, in climbing up this mountain, don't fall back down to base camp, because it's just futile. Like we were just talking about, once you start, commit to it and don't give up. Resolutions fail. New Year's resolutions in particular, most of the time they fail, but covenants don't. Make a covenant with God that no matter what he gives you to handle, you're going to handle it faithfully. God may bless you with more, but again, you have to be faithful. Money is not a life preserver, but Jesus is. So there's a story of the old woman with the 2 copper coins. She was very faithful and got a shout out. When you get a shout out from Jesus, that's kind of a big thing. So, again, no matter what you have, God is watching. If you don't have a lot, that's okay. Just be faithful with it, because that is more important than someone who builds a lot of wealth and doesn't really, treat it faithfully. So agape love is sacrificial love, sacrificing yourself sometimes, the things that you want to do. And I promise you, as someone who's, in the early 60s, you can look back on things that you thought were so important, half a life ago, and they end up not being. So I talk about in the last chapter, in alley-oop, it's, kind of toss the basketball up and my church has used this, I was broke, now I'm not, by a guy named Joe Sangle. It's very good. I believe he used to be associated with Dave Ramsey, who most people are familiar with. I think I've been a big fan of Dave's for many, 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 many years, going back to when I got his books on cassette tape. It was traveling around. Those are really good for the techniques, but I hope you'll take the concepts from this and go into one of these courses or others and learn these techniques, but go in with your heart right, because if you do, your chance of being successful at it greatly increase, in my opinion. We have to conquer our battles, with money, like we've been talking about all along, because that is how we attain accountability with God. A couple of things I like to point out and share with others is 1 Peter 2:9. We become part, as believers, of a royal priesthood. I mean, we become God's ambassadors. We're not just adherents. We become sons and daughters and a royal priesthood. I mean, that is enormously important. And I just love this verse in Romans 8:17. We become co-heirs of everything with Jesus Christ. Co-heirs with Jesus, this entire universe and everything in it, through our faith. So, but we've been making the point all along that our heart and our money have to be united. And this is why, because we are a royal priesthood and we inherit everything through our faith. Working on a concept for a new book to talk about the spiritual war against us once we've hit that summit. We'll see when that comes about. But just remember, spiritual warfare is very real. The enemy's going to come after you once you've climbed up and you're doing these things. He's going to come at you, but you're not standing alone. And the enemy has to be dispatched. The enemy can think or make himself known to be stronger than he is, but he's really not that strong. So want to close up with a couple of parting shots. And Matthew 11, come to me all who are weary and burdened, I will give you rest. And Genesis, this is so important. Let's make mankind in our image and our likeness so that they may rule over male and female. He created them as equals. We are to approach this. Male and female both get attacked on this, but male and female are both sons and daughters of the Most High God. And that's what this is all about.
Man, I tell you, Wade, this has been a journey, but it's one worth taking. We've been doing this quite a while, Wade. And I remember the day that I sat down in that room with you at that Sonny's that's not even there in Athens. And we talked about this book. This is This is the before budgeting book, and this is the workshop that allows you to get your mind right before you get your pen and paper right. And Wade, I thank you for being obedient. You know, I know that we've been talking about money here, but there has been hours of your time that you've given to write these books and to research these books and to make sure you're doing what's right, not only by non-believers and believers, and publishing the book in a very, man, you don't take debt for it. You do this the right way, and I want to commend you for being the role model of how this gets done. So, this is the end of the workshop for the Heart of Budgeting. We want to thank you all for being here, and it wouldn't be right if we didn't pray for us to be in a better position after we hit close on this. So I'm going to pray for us, and then Wade's going to have a parting note for you, and then we're going to let you go out there and tackle this world and know you've got some assets, know you got a friend, know you got someone who understands, but none of this works without your heart being right, not only for budgeting, but for the one who created it all, Jesus. So let's talk to him right now. Jesus, we thank you so much that Wade has been given this and he has ran with this and that he has done exactly what you've asked him to do. Now we ask you, because you are a good father, you are true to your word, to bless us, to help us renew our mind and get our hearts right, to be able to follow these principles so we can make the most out of the bounty that you give us. This is a lot more than about our dollars and pennies. This is about every second of our life that you graciously give to us without even asking for repayment. But here's a place where we can show you how much we love you by taking one part of your creation and using it to glorify you with it, and then using it to glorify your giving it. I mean, it's such a double-fold way for us to be able to engage into this. It is almost like we're triple worshiping with you. And we just want to be a part of this family. We want to do what's right with everything, our seconds and our pennies. And thank you so much for giving Wade J. Carey the ability to sit behind a desk in a small room outside of Jefferson, Georgia, to put the word of you, the Bible, in a book and label it the Heart of Budgeting. Please be with every single person that is listening to this. And if they don't know who you are, I ask for you to impose your glory, your graciousness, and your grandness onto them as we speak right now, and allow them to understand the renewing of their heart and mind through trusting you, Jesus Christ. And it's in your name we pray, and all things we give to you. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Ray.
Yes, sir.
I'll close with this. I've hit on a lot of the concepts throughout several times, and that's been quite intentional. I like to take the basics and hammer them home over and over so that they can, sink in. What I want to close with is this, Ray, this is something that we've worked on together. I wouldn't have written this book if you hadn't come to me. And so I thank you for your faithfulness with that. But, the book itself is available on Amazon. And a couple of years ago, I entered it into a Writer's Digest National Book Writing Contest. And a lot of these places I don't think are super friendly toward, Christian literature. But I will say this, that, this is not a piece of junk book. God gave it to me, and I have, put it out there for those who want to hear its message. But it got a perfect score. It didn't win the contest, but it got a perfect score. So if you want to make the investment, I don't think you'll be disappointed. This is certainly going to be something different, I think, than you might have been expecting, because it's about faith. But again, remember what Billy Graham said. If you get your attitude towards money right, I think it's going to straighten out just about everything else in your life. So reach out to us. We're both here. This is what we do. We both have day jobs at this point. So, this is what we're doing to try to help others avoid some of the mistakes that both Ray and I have made. So we're here and available. We wish you the best. Thank you for tuning in, and God bless you all.